Good morning, everybody. David R. Becker here with Becker Art, and happy Easter, everybody. Yes, I'm going to be doing a high-key painting today for you, way before the Easter Bunny drops his eggs everywhere for your children to watch and pick up and find. So, what we're doing here...
Everybody, David R. Becker here with Becker Art, and happy Easter, everybody. Yes, I'm going to be doing a...
Sorry about that. And my volume up way too high. So what we're going to be doing today is a high-key painting. And what is a high-key painting? You probably were asking. And a lot of people don't know, a lot of beginners don't know what a high-key painting is because it's a little bit more advanced. And it's a kind of a hard thing to do. But I've always tried to practice some things because I really love the look of a high-key painting. And let me just show you really quickly what that is. And so let me go over to here. And so I had done one of these before, a high-key painting video, and you can look that up. Just type into my YouTube channel, high-key cat. So this is the one. And what you can see here is that the cat, I was trying to learn how to do high-key, and when I did my class in the afternoon, I had done this one right here, this darker one. And I'm with a lot of dark values. See how all the dark values are from contrasty? It's very contrasty. With a high-key painting, the thing is that you want to do is keep all the values to like a number 4 or 5 value. Like up here, you can see I had not gone to a very dark value, a big dark value in the painting. And you save those high-key basically darks and things for the eyes and center of interest. Basically, the eye and the mouth are the only really dark darks that go beyond the like 4 or 5 value. 1 being white and 10 being black, basically. And so by making all the values, you still want to have a value pattern. Like this value pattern down here is more the background's dark and the cat is light. Where this value pattern is, everything is light except for the cat's eyes and nose and mouth. And so basically a little bit of this stuff that's grayscale, that you don't consider dark. You consider that light. You keep everything light. So today when I'm doing my little girl smelling of flowers, I'm going to keep everything light. All the values light. And I'll do more like this, where the background is all light with slight tints of middle tone. A little bit dark, but not as dark as the center of interest, which is the eyes, nose, and mouth. And it really works well when you're doing this with a portrait or an animal, but also for other things too, like landscapes. But it's harder with landscapes because, well, actually, it's not harder than landscapes. So I'm not sure why I said that. But it's basically you make everything light, all the lights, and you keep the darks. And the secondary interest, you also maybe have a little bit darker contrast in there, but you don't have contrast only in the center of interest, like the eyes and the nose and mouth of the cat, right? And this being really contrasty in the back makes the whole cat head interesting, makes it the center of interest. But most people, if I showed them this picture, these two right over here, they would choose this one because it's softer. And that's what the thing is about high key. It makes things look softer. It's just a softer feel, and it gives it that high key look. And so that was high key. Just to explain, hopefully, as best I can. And it's hard to do. It is very hard to do. Actually, I was thinking when I did this one, that I did this one down here, the darker one, my contrast one. I thought when I went into this class that was the high key one. But then when I looked again, and if you want to see some really great high-key paintings done by an artist, go to Dylan Pierce. Look up Dylan Pierce, and he does these beautifully soft backgrounds and uses the center of interest with its darks, and they're amazing, absolutely amazing. And so that's when I did this one right down here, I saw that was not what I wanted as a high key. This is not high key down here. This is contrasty. It's very contrasty. Look at the background being really dark. And I didn't save these darks just for the cat. All right, so here, let's go. And see if I can do this for this. Let's go to our tabletop. Let's see if I can't do it for this scene. And I don't have to use these colors. It's just that I did use yellow and violet a lot in this, and that's kind of complementary. But that doesn't mean I have to use those exact colors. I don't ever use exact colors of a photo. And I shifted this photo a little bit to make it more high key so that I wouldn't go in the background and make things really, really dark. And I'm just going to save the darks for her eyes, nose, mouth, and a little bit of the flower. This whole area right where her nose is and the flower, that's going to be a center of interest. So that's where I can keep a little bit of the darks happening later. So that is high key explained in watercolor, and hopefully that makes sense because it's tough to do, but give it a shot. Like this, her top that she's wearing, the purple, that's almost too contrasty. That could be the secondary interest, but not really. Maybe this loop right here could be, but I'm going to keep this soft down there too. I'm going to try to keep the bottom of her shirt soft. And so let's go from there. And let me see who's all here. I'm sure maybe nobody because I'm maybe talking to myself. Huh? Oh, look at you guys. Hey, thanks for stopping by this morning. Oh, Maria also says there's a high key painter. I'm not going to pronounce that name, but look her up or him up. It's a difficult thing to do, but if you get it right, they look beautiful. I mean, they look so soft and delicate and really neat. It's just like bright light on a subject matter. All right, let's get going here. I'm kind of scared here. You gotta get this done before you head out for Easter. And so I have my palette here, which is a little dirty. And I am going to use some yellows, and I brought with my granulating colors, but I don't think there's anything like yellowy. There's one yellow, but let's see. And I'm going to keep the white, so I didn't use masking fluid, so I'm going to have to paint around. So I'm just going to do this by hand instead of by masking fluid. And around the flower is a little bit lighter, but I'm just going to write into the flower because I'm going to do some yellows. And her hand is white, so I'm going to keep the white of the paper on the top of her hand. Remember, I got to keep these things very light, and so when I do these washes, I have to make sure that I can get them done right away because you're going to see when you're doing these light washes, they have to be done with one shot. You can't do two shots to get a light wash. So I'm going to really work hard on trying to get a really nice, beautiful wash with some beautiful colors. And I'm definitely going to use yellows because it looks so good with yellow. I like the scene it has with yellow, and keep it pretty bright right on the top of her head, this top part. And I can't, I'm thinking about the green, and I'm not sure I want green. So let's just do a little bit. And remember that watercolor dries 20% lighter, especially with this, because you're not going to be putting much pigment down. So it's going to get a lot lighter than you see. Spatter, I love spatter. And actually, high key shouldn't take as long because you're not putting down as much paint, and you're, just putting down tints. It's more of a tint that you're doing. I'm keeping part of this flower white also. Spattered into her hand, but that's okay. She should have freckles because she's a redhead, so I'm going to give her a little freckles too. And so let's go in here. And I can use violet and lilac, and that'll make it more flesh tony. And the flesh tones are almost like the background, so that's okay. Go ahead and put some of that flesh tone type of color into the background. I'm going to use a little lilac to put in there. And I'm working around something which is normally different for me. But because I want to keep the white of the paper and I don't want to use masking fluid, I just have to be a little bit more careful. I was just inside here, watching Sunday Morning on Channel 2, and they had the Frick Museum in New York, and I'm heading to New York on Thursday I wonder if I can get into that place because, man, it looked amazing. They just did a little story on the Frick Museum in New York City on the Upper East Side, and boy, that'd be kind of neat to kind of go there and see that, all the beautiful work they have. And actually, the building itself, they just renovated it, I guess. But that's like I think I probably won't be able to get in because if they just open it up, and I'm only there for 3 days, so I'm not going to be able to do very much sightseeing. I'm going to get my AWS letters from AWS. I finally get signature membership, and boy, that's been a dream of mine for a long time, and so I'm getting kind of excited. So see how beautiful the background is, and would you recommend not to go too dark with the drawing? Oh, I should have said something. Sorry about that. I was actually going to use my kneaded rubber eraser, and I'm so glad you brought that up. There's so many things to talk about when you're doing high key. That, see, my drawing is kind of dark right here, but that's where my center of interest is, so that's okay. But over here, where it's starting getting a little bit too dark, take your kneaded rubber eraser and roll it across the paper. And since it's not wet, I can do this still. And thank you, Maria, for asking that, because it is. Yeah, you don't want to have it too dark because it'll be darker than the area that you're going around, and that's not good. You don't want to make it really dark line, so keep it light, or do what I'm doing right now, get rid of the graphite, and I can just erase some of this pencil line. Because I like to shade a little bit now. I always shade when I do my watercolors. I shade, especially if it's going to be darker, but this is not going to be really dark, so you gotta watch out. Don't make it too dark. And this is a kneaded rubber eraser. I just make a rolling pin, and I just kind of take the graphite off of there. And see, that's kind of a nice wash. I don't mind that wash. That's kind of neat. And so, like, your hand right down here is lighter in the front, but I can do 2 washes on that part. So I'm just gonna kind of leave the top part of her fingers white. So it's important to keep the white of the paper, and if you don't think you can go around it, like I'm doing, then just use masking fluid. But watch your paper. Make sure that you know your paper can handle masking fluid. My paper, this Stonehenge, doesn't do a really great job with masking fluid because it rips the paper a little bit. So I don't tend to use masking fluid at all, and I just use white paint too because I don't mind that either. Just using white paint. Here I'm putting a little flesh tone on her hand, and if you can get the look of the shape on the first wash, that's fine. But sometimes it's hard when it comes to something like her flesh tone here to make it a hard edge. But one thing about high key paintings is also nice to keep things very soft and not hard edged. Like the flower is nice and the face is hard edged, but like all this other stuff, let it be soft edged. And so what does that mean? Wet in the wet, right? We've learned that. That's all I've been talking about for weeks and months now, is keeping your wet in the wet going. Floating your pigment, right? Float your pigment. And see how you pull this stuff out of there? You can pull the thicker pigment out. And I am using a limited palette, kind of. I am using purples and yellows, but I'm not reaching for anything dark because unless I want to tint it, then I can use it. But other than that, I gotta kind of watch out. I don't want to use a dark color because this is high key. I'm using only colors that go to about a number 4 value, 4 or 5. Look at that purple. I should put a little purple in here, a little lavender, a little violet, because her whole shirt is going to be that, and so it can reflect into her skin too. And I like to put a little stuff back there to make it a little bit not so flat. I want to make it look like there's something happening back here. But again, you got to watch out. Reach only for light colors. And remember also again that it's going to dry 20% lighter. It's not, like I said, it's not an easy thing to do. It is more difficult than your average really contrasty painting because you got to keep on watching out that you're not getting too dark. Because everything except for this area right there will be my darkest dark, and maybe a little bit here for secondary interest, but everything else has to stay light. And soft edge, remember, light and soft edged. That's half of the painting is done almost. See? And it looks very Eastery, right? Pastels, and you're going to go with pastel colors, right? It's just one of those things. I haven't been reading here. Hey, everybody. Happy Easter, everybody. Love the granulating colors. I brought the landscape and flower ones. Yeah, they're now available. You can go to Blix. They're now available finally at Blix. I just saw they don't have a picture of them, but they are available now finally at Blix. Hey, Jack from England. Happy Easter. You in England probably already found your eggs. We're just going to start in the morning here, and going to be heading out to find the eggs. All right, so I think that's okay for my lights, and I'm going to keep it at that. Here, get a little bit carried away with the orange. Maybe put a little bit of lavender or lilac in there too. It can be a little bit darker here. I mean, I don't mind this area be a little bit darker, but I still want to float my pigment, so this is still wet, so that's good. So I can keep my soft edges going here. And that can be a little bit more contrasty. Here, I'm going to wipe out a little bit of that. Take my towel. I'm going to wipe off a little bit of this light so I can get that look of the hand. So the hand is a little bit darker right there. All right, let's go into this side, because nice thing is I have a really hard edge right there, which is good, and now I can keep the white of the paper and just wet all her face. And I'm gonna do her face first because it's lighter, and a little bit with her hair, and then we'll just work to the right. And so I'm just gonna take clean water and kind of just put it up here, and look for where the lights are gonna stay white of the paper. And that's like around the nose, right on the nose. So I don't want to touch the edge of the nose because that's white. The bottom of the nose I can touch here. Then right in front of her eye here, it's white. And so I'm just going to wet areas, leaving the other parts alone where I'm going to leave it white. Because I want to float my pigment, right? I want to float my pigment in there, get soft edges. And I go right into her hair. Now there's some white right over here, so I'm going to watch out for that. Keep that white. This really shows you, too, how to keep the white of the paper, because I need to have white of the paper so that it stays very, very light. Again, high key. We're doing high key, so keeping things light. Go right through here. I'm just wetting it. And then make it about 20% darker than you want. And flesh tones, I usually use orange and pinks. And I'm just going to throw that in there. Right over your ear. And not too much water in your brush. I already put water down there, so I've got to stay with my pigment being light right here, light to darker. And when I say darker, it's not dark, it's just slightly darker. And I'm controlling the pigment because I'm using a lot of pigment in my brush, and it goes. This part of her eye is really dark right here, or darker. Control your pigment in the water. Control it. And that's a little bit too pink. I need a little bit of orange in there. So a little bit of orange in that pink. And right by her eye, it's a little bit darker. So use a thicker pigment right there. Underneath her nose is a little bit darker. I try to establish the flesh tones in one wash. I try my hardest to do that, because if you go back in, you're not going to get the softness. You don't get that beautiful softness that you get when you do your first wash, or one wash basically. A little bit of pink in there, a little bit of lavender, and watch your amount of pigment you got going in here, because that's what controls it. The amount of pigment and amount of water that you have, that the pigment's floating in. You definitely have to float your pigment on here, because that's how you get the soft edges. By the way, that was the video I did this week in my newsletter was by the biggest video I've ever done, where I've got over 4,000, or actually 5,000 now, 5,000 views in less than a week and a half about. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it, how many people was watching that. But I'm so into the floating your pigment, you really need to know how to do that. So it was really neat to see that so many people were watching it. And so here her cheeks are rosier, so get a little bit of pink in there, a little bit more pink in her cheeks. A little more pink right here. You can see the bottom of her mouth down here is a little bit darker too, and it goes down here. And you definitely want smoothness. And how do you get smoothness in watercolor? The pigment does it on its own. You don't have to do it. You just let the pigment come in here with water and watch the amount of water you have. It's very important to watch it and just let it float, the pigment. This is where practicing washes without even doing a painting is so important. Learning how to put enough pigment in there so it just runs a certain distance. It gives you a certain darkness. You knowing that how dark it is, that you're going to make it 20% darker. Especially down here. The color I rarely think completely about. I mean, I do think about it, but not so much as the value. The value is so much more important. I could put any color down here. I mean, I could even put yellow down there, as long as I'm looking at for the right values. You got to have the right values. And see how everything is kind of like the same value right now. Just slight changes in value. And that's because I want to keep it high key. I'll even use a little bit of white in here to throw this soft edged, but lighter right here. Lighter. Watch the amount of pigment you have in your brush. It's so important to try to not put too much water in your brush. I think that's one of the hardest things for beginners to do, is keeping their brush not as wet as you think, because there's water already down here, and so I don't need to put that much paint into my, or not that much water into my brush. It's going to float away really nicely here into the water. It's going to sit in the water and then just give me beautiful edges, because it does it on its own. The water takes care of my edges. I don't need to do anything. I do need to make it a little bit redder, a little bit more pink, I think, back here. Her ear is nice and red. Now their ear, I can, I'm starting to lose the water here, and so I'm pretty much going to have to be done here in a second. Because when you lose the shine, you lose the time to float. And so, and then you have to wait for it to totally dry. And you can do slight little areas again, but like her cheek right there, man, it's hard to go back in there and try to make that look good while it's drying. And it's like there's a little bit of shine. Maybe let me see. If I keep my brush the same wetness, I can smooth things out a little bit. You put a little bit more paint in there, a little bit more paint without around your ear here, a little bit more. I used a little bit of lilac in there. Then pushing pigment around, and this is still damp and wet, but I gotta make sure my brush is just same wetness. Let's put a little bit more water, or a little bit more pigment back here too. It's still wet enough, it's still slight wet where I can go right into there. And now her braid is a little bit lighter right there, so I'm going to stop at the braid. I'm going to let that dry now by itself, and I think that'll be fine for that. Now let's get her hair done. Let's get all her hair done. And so here it's white basically, so I'm going to go with a really light, and she's going to be a redhead, of course, you know me. And so we're going to do a little bit of yellow right here. It's almost too dark, but I can add a little bit of water to that. And I'm looking at the picture as the trains are still running on Sunday, on Easter. So that's all hard edged right there, but it is low in value or in contrast, so it can look high key. I'm going to soften it now with just water, pure water. And go with a little bit more pink. You know, pink is like red. You know, it's red with white. So I'm using some pink. And then we'll put that in there a little bit. Let that float. Keep it light. Watch your values. Watch your values, what you see in the picture. Look where the hard edges. This is okay to have a few hard edges here, but keep them not contrasty. It looks like there's a fold that comes back here. It's like a little fold of hair. And this gets all wet in the wet now. I'm going to wet this area, watching out that I'm going to keep right above her ear there. Now I'm going to wet all of her hair. This part is kind of center of interest area. So I want to keep that hard edge just for lightness and for softness and no contrast. Yeah, Marina, it's SEO, but the SEO is like, yeah, it's, I've been watching a lot of YouTube tutorials on how to get people to watch your watch and put the different titles on, and so it's been something I don't really like doing that much of because it keeps me from painting. But if I can get more people to watch and help more people out, that's even better. And actually, what I think I'm going to do next Thursday is talk about how we're going to talk a little bit more into the comment section instead of the chat, because please go to the comment section and comment or ask questions there, because I think that actually helps out more than a chat, because it's one of those things. It's just chatting is fine, but once you're done with the live, then it's the comments that makes your videos go a little bit better. So don't be afraid to. I think what I'm going to do is put in my comments there and look and see if I can't look at that just as well as I can just as well as the chats. So I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about, but underneath the description of the video, there's where you can comment and ask questions after the video's live. And so that is kind of a good place to go and ask me questions and talk and say whatever you want to say. Basically, I hate this video, I love this video, you know. So good or bad, it helps me out when you comment afterwards too. They want to see that people are watching and that people are commenting and stuff about the video. And actually, I thought nobody's going to be here this morning, but thanks guys for coming by and watching. And so now we're going to go down here. You go down here and just kind of, I'm going to try to do soft edge braids here, because it's a little bit darker right in here, but I've got to keep it, I don't want to make it too high key yet or too contrasty, because I still want to keep my contrast over here. You got to keep these parts, yes, you can go a little bit darker here because it is a little bit darker right there. And I'm using, don't be afraid of using some other colors besides what you used, like use a little bit of this violet again. Get some of that violet that's over here over to this side. Now the ear I kept pretty light, but see how I'm getting light lines right there? But once they dry, there's not much pigment in there, it'll dry smoother. And then I can put hairs kind of floating down here too. Let me put the light part of the braid first. So the braid is lighter, and so I'm just going to put like a wash on the braid. And then I'll braid it, basically. See how I'm letting my pigment float? I'm letting it float in there. I'm always floating my pigment. I don't care if you're doing a hard edge or a soft edge. On the hard edge, it's hard edge in a spot, but inside the hard edge is going to be a floating pigment. It's going to float, and it looks the best that way. You know, having your pigment float and do its own softening, that's what watercolor is. It's basically, it's doing its job. So see how I wet the braid, and now I can go in there and I can do the lights and darks of the braid by just putting more pigment in certain areas. I left her outfit because it is going to be a little bit different. And look at here, I got a watermark that's kind of weird on her arm. Oh well. I just want to put this in her flesh tone right here. So if any of you are going to New York next week for the show or for the Thomas Schaller is demonstrating next Thursday in New York at the Salagumdi Club. If you're there, please say hi. Love to see you. All right, I'm just kind of putting this together here now. I missed the arm right here. I just noticed that I missed that part of the arm. I want to make it a little bit darker back here. All right, so let's get my smaller brush and do her braids. So I got to braid her hair. So the comment section pops up after the live is over. Oh, okay. Let's get these braids going here now. So the dark parts, I'm going to take a nice light color. Again, I'm not going to take a dark color. Maybe some more orangey. I'm going to start braiding it by putting the darks in the crevices. And they can be soft edged though. They don't have to be hard edged. And so use a little bit more pigment, thicker pigment, especially, remember I wet this, and so I can't go in there with a lot of water on my brush. I've got to go with less water on my brush and then create the shapes that the darks that I see in here. But now this is already dried here a little bit, and so I'm getting a little bit harder edges, but that's okay too. I can have a few hard edges here, but I'm getting pretty dark here. Look at that, that's pretty dark. But I'm going to go with even darker than this, so that's okay. I think it'll be okay. Let's see. It's such a short amount of darks that you can get in a high key. You really have to watch it, and one stupid dark brush stroke and you're done. You know, it's like you gotta keep it light or soft edged and non-contrasty. Now I'm not getting this exact braid up here. I kind of lost my drawing up here, and so I'm gonna have to make this up a little bit. And I'm doing hard edges right here now, but they're very light, so they're not very contrasty, so it'll be fine. If you don't want to make something look contrasty, but you still want to make it look soft with the hard edge, just make it less contrasty. Contrast meaning really dark against the light. Just keep those contrasts very light, and you can do hard edges and it won't look hard edged. And these darks that go into the braid here, I'm going to try to make them I'm going to make them soft because it's wet, but I'm going to make them just slightly darker. Because I penciled that in. I put that in with shading. So I kind of know where it has to be dark. I'm just covering up my pencil lines to do the dark part of the shade. But again, use enough pigment because there's water's already down there, so I got to use enough pigment just so that it stays in that area. Thicker pigment stays in the area, but it gets soft, but it'll stay in that little area that you're painting. And the braid, right on the bottom here is the darkest part, so you can just put a little dot right there and let it bleed back up. And then this is darker on the outer edge of her neck here. Work your brush. No much pigment, no much water, no much pigment's in your brush. It's so important. That's the part that makes it possible to control your paints, control your washes. You control them with the amount of pigment without the water in your brush. Like there's a lot of water on my paper right now, and so I've got to use a lot of pigment so it doesn't run all over the place. I will be using some white and light afterwards for hairs that are just kind of floating down by themselves. That's okay, you can do that. I especially like that look. Actually, I keep on telling everybody I do that a lot because I like that look. I like the look of having a little bit of kind of like an oil painting technique with your watercolors. Light, see, I'm just going to kind of make it lighter ear. Keep the spots still soft edged. I'll go back in there for getting the lighter stuff later. Behind her ear is going to be a little bit darker right here, so going to put a little bit of darkness behind the ear. Gives also the shape of the ear then too, right? And if it's dry, you can rub it down here a little bit. It'll soften by itself. Now back here, it's all going to be like what's over here. Always when there's something on this side of something, of an object, make sure it's on that side too. So I'm just going to make yellow over here, basically. And make it down to a light. I think I'll just make it down, or dark. Not too dark though. Oh, your chat went away again. Yeah, it kind of does, Maria. I mean, when you're doing high key, a lot of people only use tints when they're starting out as beginners. So, but they just got to realize that in the end of it, you do have to have some darks in your center of interest, and hopefully you designed it well. So it's more about designing it, I guess, for beginners, that they don't design it super well, because they like to use a lot of tinting because they don't use much pigment. And that's one way of tinting, is not using that much pigment. And a lot of water and not much pigment. Put a little details in here. I'm not sure why, but just okay. Let's get into our top now. And I am not going to make it as purple. Like I said, I'm not going to make it as purple as in the picture, because I think that takes away from the high keyness to the painting. And that's way too light. I'm gonna have to spray that to show you how. When this is dry, it has to be the same value as the side of her face. And so, matter of fact, almost like this. So you get that roundness. That's kind of too hard edge there. But I have to wait for it to dry, and I'll show you how I do that. So let's go down here real quick. What time is it? Oh, I still got time. Let's take my bigger round brush. And I'm going to keep this pretty yellow first. Like I'm going to have it white on the edge. It is lighter than the background. And so what I'm going to do is then put lilac and lavender in there. Make it a little bit more pastel than the picture itself, but not make it quite as dark and as violet as the picture. A little bit more yellows and stuff in there, I think, would help me out a little bit. You can put them both together, it's fine. They're floating, and that's like the granulating colors, which again, like I have them here, but I'm not going to use them because I don't have a good color that I think would match what I'm doing already. So take some lavender and lilac and just let that float into the orange and yellow. And a little bow tie here, I can go in there. Watch your values, watch your values. It's a high key painting. I'm just saying it to myself, guys, don't worry about that. I have to remind myself that I'm doing a high key painting. It's hard, I swear. I so want to put darks in there, because that's the way I normally do everything, is really darks and contrast. And so doing a high key painting for me is really, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to do. It's harder. You think that everything has to be, contrasty to get things to move forward and back, and it's easier when you do that, but I'm going around some of the lights. Yellow and violet will make a complementary color, but if you keep it where it's floating together, they can make some really neat granulating colors that come together. It's how you lay them together that is important. Like, so I make it wet into wet, and I just let them mix themselves together, and they'll be fine. Like, look at that's purple and orange and yellows and stuff, and that's like gives it a nice granulating colors. they're granulating. I see them. They're two different colors I put together. They're complements, so they make a gray slash a gray and a brown. Usually that's what complements make, grays or browns. Just decided to make this background a little bit darker. Control's hand. Go on the other side of this. That's finger right there. The back of her thing here. There, then a little bow tie. When you use pastel colors, you got to remember that's a little bit more opaque also. Like these colors, the violets, they're opaque because they're made kind of pastel-like. And how do you make pastel? It's usually with white, right? And so they are a little bit more opaque, those colors. But if you work them wet in the wet, they'll be fine. You do work them wet and wet, and they'll act like transparent watercolor because you're using a lot of water. That bow tie I want to make yellow. And then I'll go back in and I'll get the dark details, right? The dark details are like what you do last, even in this instance. It's always a Becker 3-step, no matter what you do, a high key or whatever. We start with our lights, but most of the painting is lights, so we're good. Very Eastery colors, right? So now into her flower here, I'm going to wet the center here because I'm going to use some of that reddish color, reddish pink. And I'm just going to let that float from the center here. And this can be contrasty now. This is parts that I want to be contrasty with this part. Because this area right here can have slight parts of the contrast. So I can go really super dark there. But I want to do with the color. I want to kind of go with the color and make it nice and dark. And her fingers here holding the plant. It's a little dark right here. That's her finger. That's her thumb. Save your darks. Save your darks for the final, the final area here. Her lipstick is going to be, her lips are going to be nice and reddish pink. And so I'll just put them in there. I'm in the detail stage now, basically. I did all my large mediums, all my large darks. And so now it's detail time. And I'm going to start in my center of interest here, so that way I know how far I got to go with the other parts. Because if I go with these parts and make them too dark, then I have to make these really, really dark. I'm just going to go in here now. A little bit smaller brush, come on. Let's use a smaller round. Where's my smaller round? No, it's not there. I'll use a rigger. Use my rigger, and the front of her lip is really light, but the bottom of her lip is a little bit darker. Pure pink. And her upper lip is dark. A dark red. Right by her mouth, it gets a little dark right there. Like underneath her nose and underneath her eyes, there's too much lead there. I should have rubbed that off, but remember I didn't do it while it was wet. So, David, as a former acrylic painter in the transition to watercolor, I have so much trouble learning to float the pigment. This is a great image and one I've watched several times, Robbie. Oh, she'll watch it several times. Yeah, it's hard to do high key. And now these leaves right here, I know they're kind of greenish, but what I'll do is I'll make them more yellow, or I'll make them yellow and put a little bit of the violet, which has some blue in it. So it'll have the look of a little bit of green, but I'm definitely not going to use green now. Sometimes it gives you that kind of look of green because of what I'm using, the violet and the yellow and oranges. So that can kind of give you somewhat of a green look, because violet has blue in it, right? And so you can get a little bit of a look of green by just using the violet. That's a leaf. Back here is a dark leaf. And so it makes the other parts look nice and light. I don't want to make it too ugly though. I don't want to make it just gray. So a little bit of no matter what you're doing in watercolor, you are always floating your pigment. I can't say that enough. You float your pigment. It's a hard edge is dry, but inside here, inside this little leaves, it's wet then, right? And I'm floating my pigment inside the leaf. And I can make the shape of the leaf by how dark and how much pigment I put in there. On the side, I can put a little bit thicker to make it so it doesn't bleed all the way. Look at how this one came up there. It's nice and it's puddling right here because all the pigment's kind of floating to that area. And that's great. I don't have to do anything. I just let it go there. That's what I love watercolor about so much. It's just like it does so much on its own. You just wet it and let it bleed. Let it go. Now the flower itself is yellow, but because I have so much yellow, I'm going to leave it more white than yellow. So I'll put some yellow in there, but leave a lot of light. I'm just going to put the yellow on the bottom parts, the parts that are shadowed a little bit. And then the background is a little bit darker too, so I'm going to have to maybe make the background a little bit darker, but I can show you how to do that in a second. What I'll have to do is wait for this stuff to dry though, like the lips and her eyelashes are going to be, I know they should be blonde, but I'll make them a little bit redder. A little bit redder and a little bit darker for eyelashes. And you don't have to do every individual eyelash, you can just do them as the area being dark. And underneath here a little bit darker, like where eye is. Put a nice orange underneath for shadowing for underneath her nose. I'm doing that because I put that, I have the graphite underneath there, so it's really making it ugly. So I got to put a little bit thicker color there so that it looks a little bit warmer instead of the gray that is the pencil line. And that was my fault for just not erasing it before I got started. And now I can go in and I can get some, I can float some more pigment in here. And it gets darker right here by your eye, but then it gets really light there too. And look how detailed I'm trying to get. I am trying to get very detailed. I mean, it's important. It's her face, so it's okay to go as fine as you can. And then her eyebrow here. Eye is sunk back in a little bit. But the front of her, I just messed up the front of her eye because the front of her eye should be really light right there. So what I'll do there is I'll put white paint there later on. And her eyebrow is basically right here. And so there's not much of an eyebrow on this little girl. And to make him look like a girl, you can't make him look like an adult by putting, all these big, sunken in eyes and stuff. And it hasn't grown into her face yet. Like her eyelashes are not way up here. It's all kind of compact together. You can see how there's white here, but there's also white here, and I missed, and that's fine. I'll do that later. So let's make this petal a little bit more orange. Get your eye over there, so a little bit of more orangey earth tone. Hard edge, right? Because it's dry, so I'm getting a hard edge. But inside the hard edge, I can put it whatever I want in there. I can float some yellow on the tip right here. I can float some yellow in there. I can float colors into those wet washes. That's floating your pigment. And that's like, I mean, you do that so much, and so it's important to learn how to do that. Now those fingers are really light on top, so I'm going to keep them white, and I can just go with a little bit of shading on the sides. Ten minutes, and then you guys are off to find those eggs. So let's see, we're going to make this a little bit, her hand goes down to here. Shadow underneath her hand. It's really red inside here because it's the flesh is shining, the light is shining so bright that you get the flesh tones. And see this little dark right here, well that's going to have to be in the eye later. I need this kind of thing right there. And I will, once I feel this is really dry, I am going to put another wash over that. And I'm going to show you how you can do that again for the second time. It's not that hard. You just have to wait till it dries and then go back into your area, re-wet it, and try again. Look at what happened here. This is a big watermark type of thing, but look at all the beautiful little, what do they call them? I call them thin little fingers that are bleeding towards that way. I love that. Look. It's like a watermark, but that's okay. Sometimes watermarks can make it look really neat. Let's get underneath her fingernail here, a little darker in the front. That's just her fingernail. Here her palm. This part is her palm, so we're going to do that really quick, like that. There's almost a little bit too much white here. So I'm going to put a little bit less white right there. So I'm re-wetting. I don't wet just one part. I re-wet the whole little area here. And then she's got the shadow underneath her nose here. And so I can put a little bit more darkness there. And maybe a little bit more warmth. But the less a line in a little girl's face like this, the better. You don't want to put like age lines or anything like that, right? I mean, you just want to make it everything nice and smooth. Now I do have to get in here darker. That's because if I want to make these light and the background darker, that's one thing I'm going to definitely have to try. So what I'll do is I'll first put this. I'll make this orangey. I'll make this go to a light, and then this will be darker behind there. Hard edges, wet and dry. See, that's dry paper behind it, hard edge. But inside now here it's going to be wet, and I can float pigment around there. I can make it soft, and I can just move it around. But my background around this area has to be darker, because you see that in the photograph, right? In the photograph up here. You see that right around here is darker behind there, so I do have to get those darks in there. I kind of wish I got them in the beginning, but that's what happens. Sometimes you just have to go in later. Now let's get all these little details. Let's actually do her face right now. Let me show you how to go back into her face. As long as you have clean water, nothing will happen. Like if you go like this, watch. I'm just going to put clean water right here. Right to her ear. Excuse me. I'm just re-wetting some areas here. And nothing will happen. I mean, absolutely nothing will happen. If you lightly put the surface wet again. Oh, I went past her chin. Darn it. Nothing will happen because what I'm going to do is I'm not going to touch those areas. I just need to, I can't just wet this area. I have to wet the whole face if I want to work in that one area. But now it's all wet again. And as you see, things are very light. And so I'm just going to wait till the very end to put the dark in here and the dark right there. And it'll just work perfectly. Like the cat one that you saw. And what am I doing? Okay, I'm going with my little bit. I'm darkening this area here with some beautiful flesh tone. So orange. I use pink and orange. And so this has to be a little bit darker here. Maybe a little bit of orange and pink. Thicker paint too. Make it a little bit darker. So see how I'm going back into an area, a big area. I just re-wet it real lightly. Gonna go in here, get it this time. Try to make sure I get the exact values I want. I did not get them the first wash, and so people always think that you have to get everything in the first wash. Well, yeah, it's nice when you do, but sometimes you just don't. And so you can go back in. It's no big deal. You just re-wet it with water, and then get the right value, the right color, whatever you felt you didn't get the first time. Go back in and get it better the second time. Like your cheeks can be a little bit darker with a little bit more warm pink. Like I can do a little bit more pink right here in her cheeks. I think I want a little bit more pinks right here. And it's all floating pigment, so it's going to stay really super soft. It may not be right away. Let me just walk over here. And then make this darker, because I'm going to make this all darker down here. Now I did go beyond her chin, so I'm going to have to make that nice and thick. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker this time. A little bit of purple and gray. And so this part right here, I'm just going to let that be hard edged. I wish I didn't go farther down with water. But that's just, sometimes you do things you don't want. It goes up. It's about floating your pigment and letting it float, and it'll soften itself smooth, all on its own. As long as you give it water, it'll soften itself smooth, all on its own. This has to be a little bit darker up here too. And like I could use the mister, but sometimes that makes little dots on the face, and so I'm just gonna keep on applying the paint with my brush and the water also. I'm just gonna apply more of it with my brush and with the water basically. And then her chin right here, or cheek right here, is a little bit darker right here, and the ear goes right into her ear. Does the same darkness. And you have to watch out. That's going to get smooth. It looks really kind of like, looks really patterned with brush strokes. Like you can see lines in there. But because it is very wet, it will smooth itself out. I'm going to guarantee it will. Because there's water, and the water does that to pigment. It floats it and makes it really nice. And the thicker my pigment is, the more I can stop the edge from being washed away, right? And I will go in here now and get some of this light hairs by rubbing out. Watch this. I'm going to take this and just rub out. There's a hair, a light hair, and I rubbed that out. I didn't put paint in it. I'm just rubbing out to the paper again. I'm just going to take this down here too. Make a little hair. Just rub it out. A little bit darker, a little bit more purple in here. Just like, all right, now let's go in here and get this dark down here. Kind of lost it. I got a lot of watermarks in this area here. Let's get a little bit of lavender in here. Float it, definitely float it. I rarely put in paint when it's not floating. Very seldomly do I put paint where it's just sitting there like a texture. Because you can get texture when you have a paper dry and you take your brush across the paper to get texture, but I'd rather get the texture wet in the wet. I like that kind of texture better when it's wet in the wet like that. All right, so now it's time to get in there, and it's going to be tough, but let's do it. It needs to be dark back there so I can pop her face out and pop the flower out, because that's my center of interest. So here we go, but let me just first put this in here. A little dark in here, and our I didn't look for any questions. You guys got questions? Stupid advertising always drives it down. Oh, the notonizer, yeah, the notonizer is a great to decide where your lights and darks are gonna be, right? Now, a notonizer, when you do it like this, I should have done that to show you guys that the only thing that should be dark would be the eyes in this area, and they're not very big parts, because this is all light, right? This is all, I know this is middle tone and has some details in it, but it's light. It's basically my light area. What was I going to do? Okay, the dark background. Do we have time? Oh, we're done. Let me just do this one wash. Sorry, a little bit over. Stopped looking at the clock, unfortunately. Let me just do this really quickly and make this a little bit darker in here. Make my background darker, and you're off then. And you're free to go. Seems you're going to take a little bit of orange back there. Portraits take you a little bit longer anyways, you know, when you're doing a portrait, because you got to be careful on your drawing, you know, when you're doing a portrait. You can't go fast and just randomly just do, okay, yeah, that's good enough, you know, just put it anywhere. No, it's got to be in a certain spot, and you got to keep it nice and clean. And the line that you put down has to be right that line. You cannot be off by a little bit, because even off by a little bit is a lot when you're doing a portrait. Let's see, I made it a little bit darker. Not real a lot darker. I mean, it's not super dark there, but just darker so that it pops forward. I used less color in there too, if you notice. I used a little bit less color. But then I'll bring it back here, down here. I'll bring back a little bit more color. Orange, maybe. Couple more brush strokes, and I'll finish it afterwards. So let's make this a little bit darker over here. Keeping some of the light. Yeah, the detail, basically all I'm going to be doing is like really fine details like I did there, the little darks, just so that it has that beautiful look of center of interest. I'll be working that. But I hope you get the idea of why and how to do a high key painting, because that's basically I wanted to show you guys. High key, like what is high key, and be able to do wet in the wet and not put so much dark pigment. You know, you can still put a lot of pigment into a wash that is not so dark. I mean, people always think that when you put a lot of pigment in, it's always got to be dark. No, you can put, like, I could put a little white in there. Watch this. I'm going to put a little white right there. I think it actually looked good right there. A little light white, and it'll give me those little, like, kind of little fingers. And this has to be a soft edge. All right, guys. I think that's going to be about it. Let me put her eyeball in there. Just the color. Let's see, dark blue. Let's see. She's probably hazel eyes, maybe a little bit of green, maybe. So really dark right here. And I will put eyelashes, nice single eyelashes for detail. Let's just do a few here now first, just to show you. Really dark right by her ear. And what else? And I'll go in with a little white paint also in the end. little bit of white paint. Sorry, I've been over so much, but you get the idea, right? You get the idea of high key and keeping my darks now only into that one little area right here. And most detail, too. The most detail will be in there where I get every eyelash, and I'll even get like a little light in there, a little light eyelash. Because I noticed in the picture she has blonde eyelashes, so they get really light, and then a little bit of white I'll put right there. All right, so until Thursday, and actually, no, there is going to be no paint along on Thursday. It's going to be on Wednesday night. So look for Wednesday night for my paint along, because next day I'm going to New York on Thursday, so I will not have time when I'm in New York, and I'll be watching actually Thomas Schaller's demonstration next Thursday, and so you can watch my demonstration on Wednesday night this week. All right, until then, we'll see you then, guys. Bye bye.